G'day everybody, and welcome to week 5 of the Writing from Life Winter Writing Challenge. The place to be if you want to write about your life but need a little bit more inspiration and a few prompts to get you along the way. So of course the first question for this week is, how did you get on with the prompt for last week? Which was, of course, write about one of your first jobs or your first job. So how did you go? I have to admit that prompt really didn't spark any memories for me. I came up with a few anecdotes, but nothing clear enough to write a story on. So I'm going to store that prompt for later use. However, I do hope that it helped you come up with something. I guess each of us have our own sections of memories that are clearer than others, and some memories need a bit more of a prod than others. So hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll come up with the answers and the stories to back up that prompt later. I know quite often in these videos I often refer to writing anecdotes as opposed to stories, and it occurred to me that really I probably should clarify what I mean one from the other. So to me, in this particular instance, an anecdote is just a moment in time. It's just 100 words on a page, basically, an event that happened, something that would fit handwritten, basically, in a notebook like this. And that's all I have on mine. I just have the stories, short ones, enough to show something about my life, but not the whole story. But then again, when I'm talking about writing stories in this particular instance, I'm not talking about 1,000 words. I'm not talking about 2,000 words. Basically, to me, a story about my life is something that doesn't fit on the page. Something that's, maybe a few paragraphs long at its shortest, and maybe a few pages long at the full length. Something in between those two. I mean, obviously I could be writing something longer. We all could be writing a longer story. But since the point of this challenge is to actually get stories down on the page without any pressure, without any deadlines, without any major structural requirements, to me, the stories that I'm writing for this challenge are a lot shorter. And I have to admit, which I really probably shouldn't as a writing coach, is that a lot of the stories I write, I don't even reread. I don't proofread them. I don't edit them. Because to me, the point is to get the words on the page, to get the story on the page. I can go back later and play with them, to proofread them, to edit them, to strengthen them, to join them together, if I choose to. But that's not the essence of the challenge. If I'm going to write my stories so that they're going to be published, yes, I'm definitely going to proofread and edit them and play with them and put words in to strengthen them. But at this particular point, the purpose is to write down memories. It's to reflect on my life, or for you to reflect on your life. So the proofreading and the editing and the rereading isn't so vital, basically and simply put. So if that's been a concern of yours, please don't worry about it. It's not a big issue. You can fix it later if you want to. Fix it at your own pace. Because, as I say, the point of this challenge is simply to get your memories on the page. The other thing I wanted to ask you, following on from last week's video, was, did you get around to creating a tally of your anecdotes and stories? Have you now got a number in your head of how many you've actually written? Can you celebrate with the fact that you've got some anecdotes, you've got some stories, you're making headway? You've actually got something written down on the page. Because whilst it's important to have goals, it's also important to celebrate when you reach them. And for those who are curious as to how I've gone this week, I will put my goals and my tally at the end of this video. But in the meantime, what is the project for this week? Well, it's something that seems to have been surfacing a while over the last few weeks. I keep seeing things that trigger memories from varying parts of my life, childhood teenage years, adults, married life, all kinds of aspects. But it didn't really surface as an idea of a prompt until yesterday when I was walking through the local supermarket and found myself, surprisingly enough, in the confectionery aisle. Not somewhere I usually end up, especially now that I'm trying really hard to give up chocolate. But whilst I was walking down the aisle, I found myself looking at all the lollies, or sweets, depending on which country you're watching this from. And just looking at them reminded me of the ones I used to eat as a child. I thought most of the ones I used to eat had been renamed or taken over by different companies or repackaged or simply disappeared. But there were a selection there that I clearly remember having as a child. So that was the trigger for this week's prompt. And basically it's to look around your house for any memorabilia from previous times in your life. It might be ornaments, it might be photos, it might be toys, it might be a board game, it might be jewellery, it might be kitchen equipment. I know that in the house sit that we're currently in, there are a whole variety of kitchen utensils that I haven't seen since my childhood. I recently was talking to another family member and saw the scales from my childhood. I mean, these were the old scales. Not only are we not talking about non-electrical ones, we're talking about the ones that had the metal weights and the metal bowl, and you put the thing in and you've got to try and balance the weight. I can't even remember how we used to do it, because I've got so used to easier techniques of modern scales. An interesting memory that I got from looking at these scales was the fact that I was born at home, and when the midwife turned up, they discovered she'd actually forgotten her scales. So when I was born, I was weighed in the kitchen scales that I recently saw on the windowsill of a family member. I mean, how's that for jogging your memory? I don't actually remember the event, of course, but I do remember being told I was weighed at home on the kitchen scales. Not something that happens too often these days. Well, certainly not in Australia, maybe other parts of the world. But that is this week's prompt. Look around, find some things that prompt memories. Now, they could be things that you have in your house. They could be things that you see in a second-hand store if you're able to go out and about during the lockup. They could be, if you're not able to go out and about, then why not check out some of the second-hand online websites, or even go and look at an online store that sells board games and toys, and have a look at the ones that are there, the ones that you may have used, played with, or that you may have bought for family members, or that you may play with your grandchildren. I mean, that's something that hasn't changed. Toys, board games, we still use them. The only thing that's really changed about them is which ones we use and how we use them. Maybe you even have a game or a jigsaw or board game that's passed down the generations, that you used as a child, that your children played with when they were children, that your grandchildren are now having fun playing with you whilst playing with them. I mean, like I say, so many things to think about. It's not just having a look at an old-fashioned kitchen flower sieve. So that is your prompt for this week. Hopefully it will inspire all kinds of things. Hopefully some stories, not just some anecdotes, although both are good. And of course, if you write them down as an anecdote, you can expand on them later, as I hope to with my anecdotes, especially after not really achieving a decent story this week. And of course, as always, if you want another writing prompt, there is the Tuesday weekly writing prompt that will come out on Tuesday at 10 a.m. Tassie time. And there are now over 20 writing prompts on the channel that you can pick from if you want something extra to write about, as well as the Tuesday prompt. To keep up to date, of course, with all the extra posts and videos that are coming out, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, give me the thumbs up, and to join me on my Elizabeth's Writing Page Facebook page. And finally, to the last bit of this video, what are my goals and what have I achieved this week? Well, my goals are to write another 10 anecdotes in my book, and hopefully to actually write a story relating from my life. Whether it'll be from this week's prompt, I think quite possibly it will be. I have a few things going through my mind. Or whether it will be an expansion on one of my anecdotes, or even if it's something else that comes to mind in the meantime, I'm not quite sure. But that is my goal. 10 anecdotes, one story. As to what I achieved this week, well, I didn't quite manage what I was hoping for. As you may remember, my goal was to write at least 10 anecdotes, but ideally 14, so that I managed to round the amount listed in my book up to 45. Didn't get to 45, did crack 41. So I reached the lower side of my goal, which is something I'm quite happy about. I'm sadly not quite so happy about that most of them I've written in the last 5 hours, because I was doing the video, and there's nothing like having to own up to not getting to your goals to motivate you to finish them. So that's my anecdotes. As to my stories, I managed one, which of course is way better than none, and I'm happy to have managed one. Part of me would have liked to achieve more, but like I say, I am happy with one. One story a week will still give me hopefully a dozen by the end of winter, which is a lot more than I started with. Let me know though how your tally is going. I would love to know how many stories and anecdotes you've written, and whether you're reaching the goals that you're setting yourself. If you have any comments, of course, please leave them in the comments section of this video, or, as I said earlier, come and see me on my Facebook page, Elizabeth's Writing Page. But in the meantime, have fun with your writing, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye.